Hello, I'm Jayanto Chatterjee with you for the next 4 weeks on management of field sales. This is our third session, and our today's title will be the process of value addition in the sales process, or in short, what we can call value adding field sales strategy. The first point I want to make to you is that understand that the field sales process is very personal. Personal because there is a lot of face time involved in making a sales happen, which means there is a lot of person-to-person interaction. And also developing relationship is a very human process, and understanding of the customer not as a mark or not as an object of your target fulfillment, but understanding the customer as a person with likes and dislikes, all that will be very important in creating this value adding sales strategy. Now, value adding selling is therefore a series of creative improvements in the sales process that enhances the value derived by the customer from your goods and services. And if you remember the introductory session that we had, even in the introduction video of this course, which you can see on the YouTube, I have mentioned that how sales transformed itself from a somewhat dubious reputation to today's situation of a virtuous position, today's situation of the salesperson being a partner, a consultant. And today's session, this third session, is an introduction for you of this, what do we mean by the value-added sales. So fundamentally, value-added sales aims at creating a deep relationship with the customer, which makes the customer not only agreeable and glad to give you repeat business, but also becoming a referral point or kind of a co-salesperson with you for the wider market. Through social media, through their contacts, they become your referral point. So partnering is our objective. This is the key objective that drives today's sales mission, and it is a strategic series of actions. The three keys that you see on the screen on creating this partnership is to start with relationship that is built on shared values. Shared values means the customer's values, what the customer wants to derive from the goods and services that you are offering, what problem the customer wants to address with your solution should be the guiding value. So it is not equal in that terms of the two sets of values, your values as a seller and the customer's values. They're not an equal partnership, but I would say that the customer's values should dominate that relationship and should actually guide, and therefore you as a salesperson have the responsibility of adapting to the customer's requirements, real requirements, and trying to fit the best solution that you can offer. And in the process, never deviate from ethics. That means not create a sale for something that is not exactly fitting the customer's value requirement. If this process is based on good understanding, good faith, is based on trust, then this type of sales process can create very long-term success record. So the role of the salesperson, this is a very key point, which is shown on the third bullet. The role of the salesperson today has shifted from the traditional concept of selling, which is just exchange of value, to long-term supporting and long-term servicing the customer need. So, resolving customers' pain through your goods and services and creating gain for the customer is the meaning of value proposition or value-driven selling. Now, to do this well, to be adaptive to somebody else's needs, to understand deeply the customer's requirement and to come up with solutions that meet that requirement, obviously you need to have empathy. Empathy, as you know, is the ability to walk in somebody else's shoes. Empathy means to be able to think in the profile of the other person as if you are that other person. So his or her pain should be felt by you. Now, on the other hand, you do have your self-interest to make the sale happen. So, as I mentioned yesterday, a certain kind of paradox or conflict arises here. And to manage that, the first thing that we are going to discuss today is how you are going to manage yourself. If you do not have a strong, positive self-concept, then you will actually feel that as if you are losing if you have to adapt yourself to the customer's need. If you have to, in the ultimate case, say, no, I don't really have a solution for you. If you can come up with that kind of honest position, sacrificing your short-term need of making a sale is possible only when you have strong self-concept. Self-concept, therefore, focuses on the long-term future, on the relationship creation, and it does not, therefore, also dwell too much on the past. And the focus is on today, because it is today's actions that create the future. And to be able to develop a strong self-concept, to be able to have empathy, to be adaptive, you also need to develop expertise. It is a knowledge-driven set of activities. It is a knowledge-oriented personal exchange development that can actually make the adaptive selling process meaningful. And to end this process, our discussion on this process of developing a positive self-concept is also to talk about the salesperson's mental attitude. So as you can understand, therefore, as you see on this next slide, that we want to make the sales process win-win. Traditionally, it was win-lose. That means somehow manage to sell something to the customer. In the process, you win, and the customer may not really gain because that may not be the right solution or the most appropriate solution. From there, we now want to move to win-win. Win-win doesn't mean that you are giving in to somebody else's whims and fancies. It means you are deeply understanding the other person's true requirement, customer's requirement, and it is the customer's requirement, customer's value orientation which should guide the transaction and create a situation where that customer feels satisfied at the end of the process, that he or she has finally arrived at a good resolution of the pain point, and you also feel satisfied that not you have made a sale, but you have taken a step forward in the long-term relationship trajectory. Obviously, here behavioral aspects become very important, and the most important point that I emphasized over the last slide is in the behavioral management, self-management. That means your understanding of your behavioral patterns will be very, very important, because you have to adapt to the customer's need and not the other way around. To develop empathy, to understand customers' needs, as I mentioned in the earlier session, that empathy, being able to understand deeply the customer's requirement, you have to understand not only the logical or explicit needs of the customer, but also the unspoken, implicit needs of the customer. Some of that understanding will come from your expertise. If you understand your product and if you understand customers' applications deeply, you have that expertise, then you will understand that what is the implicit needs of the customer. But besides that, when you are gathering information to tailor your solution, you need to pay attention to non-verbal communication. In fact, it is well studied, well researched that in a sales situation, a good part of important strategic information will be conveyed to you non-verbally. So which means understanding body language of the other person, understanding facial expressions of the other person, understanding the approach of the other person becomes very important. I will discuss this in sort of more detail subsequently, that what exactly non-verbal part, and more importantly, you need to have different kinds of styles in interacting with the customer, what we call style flexibility, which will allow you to make certain implicit points explicit. If you synchronize, if you respond to customers' way of communication, then you will be able to extract a lot more information, deeper information, and that will help you to tailor a better solution, and also importantly to create a strategic advantage for you because you understand the customer's need better than the competitor. And that understanding comes in the field sales situation from adaptive communication. And what we mean by adaptive communication, we will discuss maybe later today or tomorrow. Some of the very simple nuts and bolts of this self-management and management of this relationship-based selling is that, you must remember names. And I want to emphasize that remembering names is not a mechanical process. It is not entering it into a computer spreadsheet. I mean, you may do that to take advantage of technology. But remembering name also indicates that you are trying to relate to the customer as a person. And many good salespersons, they not only remember the customer's names, but they understand his family situation, may remember the customer's children names. And I have seen that by creating social conversation within the total transactional process of selling, and not general talk, but more pertinent information, genuine interest in the well-being of the customer, not only in the context of that sale, but also looking at the customer as a person, understand his or her situation, how he or she really operates. I mean, the way he or she ticks. That understanding will actually create a natural, empathetic approach. So remembering names is not just a, good technique, but it also has deeper significance because it comes from your paying attention to the customer as a person. And it is only when you understand the customer as a person, your understanding of the non-verbal communication cues, like as I mentioned, body language or facial expressions, these will become more natural and not just a mechanical process that, okay, if this expression means this, that really doesn't work because human beings are all different. So your deeper level of trying to understand the customer will be the key to this whole process. Also, it is very important that as a salesperson, you have to take responsibility of your own appearance. Appearance is an important part of how you present yourself. And that presentation is the first interface. As it is often said in almost all languages, we know that the first impression creates a huge impact on the last impression. So, which means that you must be appropriate, you must be neat, you must project, a clean image. That's important. And I'm not saying that you need to be clean shaved or you need to have a trimmed mustache. Those are very trivial points, but you need to be presentable. And so you must take care in dressing, presenting yourself. And most importantly, when we talk about get-up or when we talk about appearance, it is also in the way you talk, in the way you communicate. So something like voice quality, you can practice. Actually, good salespeople practice so that their voice conveys the empathy you feel for the other person, the The consultative approach depends a lot on these kinds of appearance and communication techniques. And of course, etiquette is very important. And etiquette, you must remember, varies from country to country. Even within India, in a large country like ours, etiquette varies from state to state. And you must be sensitive to those. Therefore, you may be dealing with somebody from Andhra and while sitting in Bokaro, but you must understand that that person is not a Bokaro person, but actually in his or her core, he or she is from Andhra, and some understanding of those circumstances will be important, so that your etiquette conveys that attention. Those details are important to create, because certain types of narration, certain kind of stories may be offensive in certain culture or certain situation, or even the simple thing that putting your cell phone on mute or switching it off when you are having the interaction is very important, because you are talking to somebody, particularly to a customer in a sales situation, and you are also taking other calls. That's absolutely no. That's a simple example of etiquette, and pay attention to these, so that the customer, as I write in the beginning of today's session, said that the field sales is very personal. So in that person-to-person interaction, what we call face time, you must be focused on the customer. That's a fundamental given for etiquette. That means you are giving more deference to the person on the other side of the table. That's very, very important. And some of the approaches to develop this etiquette, ethics-driven relationship, trust-based relationship creation is that you must have genuine interest in other people, and you must be a good listener. Somebody said that, like, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so which means that the 2:1 ratio. That means you must talk 1 minute and listen for 2 minutes. That's a very natural approach, because it is only by listening you can understand the other person, because you must understand that the communication, human communication, is a multi-stage process. Like, you want to convey something, so you have a message, then you actually encode it. That means you put it in words, and you put it in verbal as well as non-verbal package. Then you transmit it, and then that means you speak it out, or you send an email, or you make a presentation. All that different forms of communication will be therefore verbal and non-verbal, and then it will be decoded by the customer, and then the customer will understand. Now, in this process, there are several issues which we must understand, and that's why being focused and being a good listener is important, because if you are not conscious about the other person's style of communication, other person's personality, then what will happen is a lot of message will get lost in this encoding and decoding, because your encoding will be not correct. Your encoding will be maybe superfluous or inconsequential. So to make meaning, to be meaningful to the customer, your understanding and being able to listen deeply is very important. And as you always know, that in such situation, you must encourage the other person to talk, because the more the customer will converse with you, the more information you will have, the more knowledge transfer you will have, and you will have a better position as a consultant. All good consultants listen more and say less, or say only those things which are pertinent. We always know that we go for advice to such persons who listen patiently and then come up with a very succinct or very precise response to your problem need. That general principle, that common sense should be applied. Of course, you must relate it to social situation, civility, paying compliments, understanding the customer's interests, etc. So to summarize, let me put forward these two acronyms to you. That first rule of self-managed, empathy-oriented communication process is CARE. The acronym stands for customize. That means understand the customer so that you are understood better. Appreciate the customer's problems so that what solution you offer is pertinent. Respond to objections with empathy and not in a confrontational manner, and execute what you are talking about through proper demonstration. And on the other side, as an internal preparation, you must understand your own style and set a goal to improve your flexibility, style flexibility. And this is what I'm going to discuss with you in the next session in more detail. Thank you.